New alarm bells ringing tonight on the coronavirus outbreak in this country.
Doctors say the virus is spread through droplets when someone coughs or sneezes.
And I think the business community, it's in their interest that people actually stay home and stop the spread.
For a business that can allow more employees to telecommute, we want you to do that.
Hi, friends. I'm Andy Paul, host of the Sales Enablement Podcast, and I want to encourage you to listen to my brand new special 6-part podcast miniseries titled Selling with Purpose. The team behind Sales Enablement Podcast and I put together this incredible series of inspiring conversations exploring what it means to sell with a mission greater than just hitting your numbers in this era of COVID-19 and beyond. So tune in to hear from world-class enterprise sales leaders and learn how their 6 companies will close $50 billion selling remotely. See how they've supported essential workers with the products and services they need to stay safe and thrive during this time of crisis. Subscribe to Selling with a Purpose now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Guided selling from RingDNA makes your entire sales team more effective by revealing exactly what reps should do and when to do it. Guided selling works by transforming sales data into a curated list of prioritized sales actions. So when reps start their day, they'll never again wonder which prospects and accounts or hot inbound leads to reach out to next. Guided selling even shifts reps' priority in response to real-time buying signals. Finally, even new reps can sell like seasoned ones. Let RingDNA be your guide to success. Learn more at ringdna.com/guided selling. That's ringdna.com/guided selling.
It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 720, that's 720, of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record. Hey, I have another great episode lined up for you this week. Joining me as my guest is Wayne Cerullo. Wayne is the Chief Prospect Officer at B2P Partners. And today we're going to be talking about the danger that sellers face by putting too much of their focus and maybe too much of their faith on data in sales, and in the process diverting their attention and their focus away from the actual prospects that they're trying to help. There's a lot being written these days about really the dangers of substituting data for your own judgment. And not just in sales, but all sorts of fields. But this is especially the case, I think, in sales, because we see data itself being presented without really relevant context, without controlling any variables, and we see too many overly broad conclusions being drawn. So Wayne and I are going to dig into why sellers, instead of trusting their expertise, trusting their experience, are increasingly becoming dependent on numbers. We'll discuss the limitations of quantitative data and try to get to the answer of what is the real purpose of the data we have in sales, what's the real use we should be having for the data in sales, and we'll talk some about marketing as well. We'll make sure we don't leave them out of the picture. So before we get to Wayne, I want to take a quick second to talk about the Sales House. This is the Sales Performance Accelerator program for B2B sellers just like you. In typical sales training, you learn a lot of things, with the exception of how to win. You know, in sales, winning orders is not the result of your process or the methodology you use. It comes from executing a lot of small things extremely well. In fact, I like to say not even extremely well, savagely well. And in the Sales House, I'll focus on teaching you the strategies, behaviors, techniques, habits, and skills you don't learn in sales training, but that make the ultimate difference in your ability to win new business. So if you're not up to speed on these essential skills, then you're going to be at a competitive disadvantage. And the Sales House is the resource you need to reach the next level, as well as the level above that. So come join. Members get unlimited access to checklists, playbooks, courses, coaching, mentoring, and an engaged community to help you sell more with confidence, with more trust, more impact, and greater acumen. So come learn how to become the winningest version of you in the Sales House. Visit thesaleshouse.com. That is thesaleshouse.com. All right, let's jump into it. Wayne, welcome to the show.
Hey, glad to be here.
It's good to see you. You're joining us from where today?
I'm on the left side of the country, near Mount Diablo in sunny California.
Now,
And
you're talking politically or geographically? They're both, actually, right?
It's a double entendre, my friend. I've lived on both coasts. I've also lived in Paris. So I've been in New York, Paris, and San Francisco, and been able to see marketing from a lot of different vantage points in the world.
Well, tell people a little bit about what you do.
Yeah. So after working with a number of companies and a number of agencies in the B2B space, I started a consultancy called B2P, which has the mission of helping marketers and salespeople become more focused on the people who are their prospects. It's a mission about.
So you're saying they're not.
Yeah, could be.
Well, no, you can be direct.
Yeah, so Andy, one of the things that I'm seeing, and one of the things that I appreciate in the work that you're doing, is that we're in a stage right now where in marketing and in sales, and I'm a marketing guy, so I apologize in advance, but I'm seeing this both in the marketing world as well as in sales, that the humanity is getting squeezed out of us, I think, as the data tends to drown us. And I think we're honestly suffering from a data delusion. And I mean that in two ways. One, that the data is overwhelming us in a deluge of numbers. And the other is that we are drowning in what we are looking at. We're focused on the pipes instead of the water in the pipes. And that's the people that we're looking to engage to help solve problems, what we otherwise call selling.
Mm-hmm. So the impact of that then, from your perspective, is this focus on the data rather than the people, let's say, that are generating it. What is that impact that you're seeing? You say squeezing the humanity out of it. What's that look like?
Yeah. So Andy, I just came from the Martech West talk, in which Scott Brinker revealed that there are now 7,040 MarTech companies.
I think we need more, don't you?
Yeah.
Because we all should have our own MarTech company.
That's right. You don't?
Whoops, sorry.
In fact, if you do the math, as we're speaking, Andy, another MarTech company is being born, and before we're done, there'll be 4,043.
Well, but take that number and say, okay, almost all of this has occurred, or certainly over the last 10 years, and really over the last 5. So we're talking about more than 1,000 new companies. Did he say why more companies think there's room to enter this market?
Well, I can't speak to that, but what I can speak to is the experience of B2B marketing and salespeople in this deluge. And that's that we are, particularly on the marketing side, we're, I believe, being distracted from the work that we really need to do. We are a company that helps companies understand better, marketing and salespeople understand better who their prospects are and why they buy and why they don't. That's fundamentally what we help with. And you can't manage what you don't know. Mm-hmm. So we help people to better know the people that they're trying to attract and to convert. So in the process of doing that, I realized that the conversations I've been having with marketers in the last few years, as you were mentioning, just let's say the last 3 years, have become odd. And I have to say this from my own perspective, we needed to do for ourselves the work that we do for our clients. And so over the last year, we've done research with a wide variety of B2B marketers to better understand what is the marketing experience like these days. And
from whose perspective?
From the marketer's perspective.
From the marketer, okay.
Like to be, rather than rather than talking with B2B
What's it like
marketers
to be you?
as our clients, talk with them as our subject.
Right. Yeah.
And so one of the things that we found is that, not surprisingly, the nature of marketing is fundamentally changing. And more of marketing is program management. You're running a data program, you're running a series of campaigns, and you are focusing on the data that comes from that because of the focus on ROI. All of that is good. The part of it that's sinisterly bad is that, or hidden bad, is that we have less opportunity to focus on the people that we are trying to help as prospects. And I suspect that's true on the sales side as well. And you can tell me better. But we have been hearing that, and it's been reported that the largest thing that marketers spend time and money on these days is marketing technology. Did you know, Andy, that more than spending money on people, more than spending money on media, marketers are spending money on technology? It's the number one marketing expenditure.
Mm-hmm. That doesn't surprise me. You're saying more than ad spend?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's a little surprising. Yeah.
Yeah, it's literally true. And I just came back.
But you can sort of understand that, though. So I think that, and this is, I think, we're seeing and replicate in sales as well, as is, it lets you sort of put the blame somewhere else, right? Because we're using this technology, we're using this system, and we follow the advice we get from these experts, how to use it. And if it doesn't work, well, we did what they told us to. And I think to a point that I think you're sort of driving at is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is that, to me, one of the, I would say artifacts, one of the things that's happening with sales, certainly, I believe it's happening in marketing as well, because you're talking about these odd conversations, is that you no longer can have a conversation where someone says, well, this is what my experience tells me. This is what my gut tells me based on 10, 15, 20, 30 years of experience. This is what what do the numbers say?
And the numbers aren't bad, Andy, as we'll both acknowledge, but you're right. What we lose sight of is that when we say data, the image that goes in our mind without even being aware of it is quantification. And there's a number of limitations to quantitative data. And I'm a quant guy, so I'm totally happy to have numbers, but they're not the only data that exists. It's not the only important information. And a lot of our quantitative data is misleading. I've heard you talk about this with other salespeople, that if you look simply at transactional data of how many calls did you make, how much was your average time spent on the phone, what it does is it turns us all into automatons without a focus on what the real meaning of the data is. And I know this has happened in marketing, that the prospect has actually gotten lost in the MQL, SQL, et cetera, mishigas. It's a technical term.
It is. It's a good one, yeah.
And what we've done is we've lost the buyer. And I say this because the work that we do is fundamentally to represent the buyer in the process. I have spoken personally with thousands of B2B buyers about what is it that they're looking for in the process, whether we call it marketing or sales. And one of the things I have to say I humbly realized after several years is that none of these people wants to buy anything. That fundamentally what they want is the problem that they're trying to solve to go away. And buying something is frankly the least of their options, the least attractive of their options. They would like it to be a problem that's episodic and that it would just disappear magically.
And they'd like magical unicorns to come solve it.
And they'd like somebody else in the company to take responsibility for it.
Yeah.
So the last thing is that you need to now be part of a large and growing, buying team that needs to go out and spend more time that you don't have, talking to more vendors that you haven't met, meeting with more salespeople, having more conversations in order to solve a problem that still hasn't gone away.
Yeah.
That's the reality we have to come back to. And now, how are we going to help them? How are salespeople going to bring value to that experience?
Well, first of all, they have to understand, and I'll sort of not spin what you said, but I'm going to put a little shine on it perhaps, is that what buyers want is buyers, very simply, and when somebody has a problem or they got a change they need to make or an objective they're trying to achieve and it requires buying a solution, and this is the thing that salespeople just don't understand, is that, and really it starts with the leaders more than salespeople, but is that buyers want to quickly gather information to make a good decision with the least investment of time and effort possible. This is what they want. And so your selling process should be aligned to help them achieve that. Instead, we create these sales processes that are really orthogonal in most respects to this mission the buyer has, because it's about what we as sellers think we need. And you just have to keep it's very simple. The buyer is trying to do something extremely simple. Quickly gather information, make a good decision, not the best decision. We could spend an hour on that. They're not trying to make the best decision. They're trying to make the good enough decision with the least investment of time and effort possible. If you can keep that in mind as a seller, that can inform your mission and your process and how you interact with the buyer. But no, we want to have these elaborate sales processes that satisfy some internal need, but to your point, don't help the buyer.
Andy, that's a profound insight, and it builds on two other observations that we made in this research about how B2B marketing has changed. It not only has become program management, but it also has become, at least in the B2B SaaS world, change management. That fundamentally, our role as marketers and as salespeople is to help a buyer not just buy our technology, but fundamentally to change the way business is done in their company. Whoa. Did I just make this is now a much larger conversation. Oh, but wait, there's more. The other part of this is that marketing has become not just program management and change management, but it's become consensus management. Because the buying process that you just talked about, Andy, doesn't occur in the singular. It never occurs in the singular.
Right.
At the least, it involves 5 people. And at the most, there's some data that says that it involves up to 21 people.
Yeah, I mean, it's
so
all over the board. Depends on the company.
About, yeah, it needs to happen. It's a very public decision, Andy, that what I'm doing as a buyer is, as one of many buyers, is I'm making a public decision with my colleagues that's going to last long after, my conversation with a sales representative or with a reading, a piece of content. I'm going to continue to be working with these people who are in my company, may include my boss or some other person with whom I have some sort of political relationship. Who knows the context that's going on here? So marketing and sales need to work together more effectively to navigate through this labyrinth of relationships that is becoming larger. The buying groups are becoming more diverse. And as a result, business as usual, Andy, is leading us into a scenario where closing is, and you look at the research, the number of lost deals is increasing. The length of the consideration process is increasing. And it's becoming harder to do what was hard to do in the first place. So the way that we're currently doing things is not taking us to where we need to go. And I think in this case, the data or the focus on quantification of the process is actually distracting us from the real work that we need to be doing.
No matter where your sales team is working from, RingDNA can enable them to be more productive and effective. RingDNA offers a complete platform for remote sales teams that gives reps the tools they need to connect with more prospects and create more opportunities and drive more revenue no matter where they're working from. And managers can get real-time insight they need to coach reps to success. Win more deals from anywhere on the planet with RingDNA. Learn more about how RingDNA helps remote teams at ringdna.com/remote work. That's ringdna.com/remote work.
New alarm bells ringing tonight on the coronavirus outbreak in this country.
Doctors say the virus is spread through droplets when someone coughs or sneezes.
And I think the business community, it's in their interest that people actually stay home and stop the spread.
For a business that can allow more employees to telecommute, we want you to do that.
Hi, friends. I'm Andy Paul, host of the Sales Enablement Podcast, and I want to encourage you to listen to my brand new special 6-part podcast mini-series titled Selling with Purpose. The team behind Sales Enablement Podcast and I put together this incredible series of inspiring conversations exploring what it means to sell with a mission greater than just hitting your numbers in this era of COVID-19 and beyond. So tune in to hear from world-class enterprise sales leaders and learn how their 6 companies will close $50 billion selling remotely. See how they've supported essential workers with the products and services they need to stay safe and thrive during this time of crisis. Subscribe to Selling with a Purpose now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Well, I think, I agree with that for the most part. I think the thing that is missing from this whole equation, and it's true about MarTech, it's true about sales technology, is that, first of all, from a data standpoint, there is no metric reliably that exists for the buyer experience and the buyer progress through their buying process. Mm-hmm. Now, we have on the sales side, we've got our linear stage-based process, we've got exit criteria for every stage, yada, yada, yada. Doesn't reflect the buyer experience at all. And so we're really completely unaware of really, in this really complex process you decide, and Gartner's done a tremendous amount of research on this and released in the fall their buyer enablement study, which had a map of what the buyer process looked like, which is they themselves, Brent Adamson calls the bowl of spaghetti, is, it's anything but a linear process. We really don't have a metric for gauging where they are in this process, because it's a recursive process. It's not linear. It's complicated. Lots of people involved. And so absent that, we're sort of shooting in the dark. And then we get to our technologies, and our technologies, our marketing technology, our sales technology. And on this show, I've interviewed literally hundreds of founders and CEOs of tools companies and so on. And the question they all have a hard time answering is, okay, great, your tool is interesting, but how does your tool help the buyer complete their mission? And it's not, CRM doesn't help the buyer. The sales technology, our engagement platforms, everything else, they're great tools from a seller, but the point is they're not having an impact in terms of increasing productivity, in a true sense, productivity of our sellers. And maybe you've seen this, but I've not seen any bit of data that says that fundamentally salespeople today, if we adjust for inflation, are generating more revenue per person than salespeople did 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And so we've had this overlay of all this technology. And I think that's sort of the point we're getting to in this data. And it's not that it's inherently bad. We just don't know how to use it yet to affect the outcomes that we want.
It's a good observation, Andy. One of the tools that we use, and I think any responsible company ought to do, is a serious independent look at the forensics behind accounts that they've won and accounts that they've lost. And I would say, rather than accounts that they've lost, I'd say accounts they didn't win, because 60% of B2B engagements end in no decision. So that's our number one competitor, whoever you are. Lack of action, lack of consensus, lack of motion. And think how frustrating that is from the buyer's perspective. Oh my God.
Actually, I'm not sure it is. Because I think the buyers make that decision earlier in the process than salespeople think. And so I think, I believe this to my core. I don't just think this. This is based on my experience selling hundreds of millions of dollars worth of orders, and especially some large, complex, or really huge organizations, is decisions. And there's research that substantiates this. There's research about decision making. It takes place in sort of two steps. The first one is yes, no. Are we going to do it or not? Right? And then the second one is, so who are we going to do it with? Well, if you have a no decision, that means they never made that first yes or no, meaning we didn't make the case compelling enough for them to say, yeah, based on everybody we've spoken to so far, right? Before we even select a vendor, we haven't heard enough to convince us that we can achieve the outcomes we want to achieve at a reasonable ROI or whatever the metric we're using to measure it. So we're just not going to go forward. And yet what happens, though, is sellers are running into that, what they think, at the end of their selling process. But the buyer stopped a long time ago. The buyer isn't even close to making a decision yet. That's what that no decision is. It's earlier in the process than people want to think. And so as sellers, we're wasting this tremendous amount of time because we do such a bad job in qualification that we don't understand, like a customer, had already made the decision not to move forward.
It's a great observation, Andy, and it actually reflects the work that we've done, where we are really focused on the trigger for the consideration. We ask, when did this begin? And we really probe into this in great detail, because any problem that a potential buyer is looking to solve was formerly simply a fact of life. It was just the way business is done. It was difficult. It may have cost them something, but until there's a perception of a solution, there never will be any action, and there never will be any public combined action. So think of what it means for something to become an issue to be solved. It means that an individual needs to see a situation, and then they need to gather a group of colleagues together to agree together that they are going to turn this into something that the company ought to solve. Mm-hmm. That one sentence included a lot of time, a lot of political capital, a lot of meetings, a lot of engagements. So understanding what is the business case behind this scenario, this situation, and what is the evidence that we can overcome it, and what is your strategy for overcoming it, is really important. And one of the ways that we have documented lots of people find out that something can be solved is they talk with salespeople and they say, so here's our situation. What do you got? And that may look like a prospect, but that's actually someone looking to see whether there's a business case to be made. Is it likely that we can solve this problem in an agreeable amount of time and money and effort? And that's the first question that needs to get answered. And it's also the last question that needs to get answered before the contract gets signed. So yeah, you're right. It is messy. And so if you don't do that serious, independent win-loss look at what the patterns are in the deals that you've done, you're going to be missing a lot of intelligence.
No, I agree. I mean, a huge and fervent advocate that, you can point to almost any issue that you have with sales short of prospecting. Once you have somebody that you're speaking with, and you look at your close rate and say, we lost for this reason, so on and so forth, you can trace almost all of them back to discovery and qualification. And qualification and disqualification, it just becomes so critical. So because you're not going to be a fit, right? There's this obsession with objection handling and so on in sales. And the fact is that, the primary issue is, do we have a product market fit? And you're not a fit for everyone. Some things aren't objections. There's facts of life. You're not a good fit for these people. Don't try to spend time handling the objection. Go find another prospect that's a better fit for you. And to your point about so many of the opportunities ending up in no decision, they weren't a fit. We weren't making the case that they could say, yeah, we've got enough information now to say we're going to go forward and make a decision, and we're going to talk to these vendors and make a choice about who we're going to make the change with. So they didn't make the decision to change. Again, that's so much time and effort and sales is spent. And, there's lots of reasons why, which we don't have time to get into now, tracing all the way to how we incentivize and measure performance for salespeople and for managers. But it's such a critical point is we just have to your point, is really understand our customers, the experience they're going through. And I think one thing that's really missing is how do we measure that? How do we accurately measure that as sellers, as marketers? What the customer thinks about us right now and how far into their process they are?
It's a great question that in its pre-quantitative form can be answered, unveiled, addressed in doing win-loss work. One of the additional areas that we have found in this process that's broken is, in a sense, the handoff, what we would from the inside say is the handoff from marketing to sales, where there's some sort of messaging that got the prospect on an inbound basis, let's say, engaged with the company. And then there's another set of conversations that happens in the sales process. Mm-hmm. And one of the places where the buyer experience, the BX here, is broken is that handoff between the messaging of marketing and the messaging of sales. One of the things that we have started doing to help bridge that and to help get the benefit of buyer intelligence, both from the sales side and the marketing side, is to look at aligning those messages. We look at identifying what messages seem to be working among the best sales performers in closing prospects successfully. What are those messages? And how do those relate to the messages that marketing is using? And they're often not that well aligned. Mm-hmm. So if you could align them better, then you could, and this is, I think, a beautiful thing for sales and marketing alignment, to actually come together around better understanding and better serving the prospect. So we enable a conversation that heretofore hasn't happened, that looks at buyer intelligence from both the sales perspective and the marketing perspective together. So it's kind of like two parents, Andy, coming together and saying, well, we may disagree on a lot of things, but at least we're agreed on, raising our kids well. And so how can we work together to make that happen?
Yeah, though I think it's a little different. I think the way it currently works, and I'll stick with your parent analogy, it's as if one parent says, well, I'll take them from birth to 6, and you'll take them from 6 to adolescence, right? And that's problematic, right? And so I think I agree about the alignment of the messaging, but I think what is more important is to sort of take that a step further and say, look, really what marketing's doing from a messaging standpoint is setting the table. And what sales need to do is build on that messaging, because necessarily what the prospect wants once they're in sales' hands is a different level and depth of information that they need in order to proceed. But yeah, the buyer's there because they saw something in marketing that attracted them and opened up this conversation, assuming it's an inbound, or even if they had seen ads and they responded to an outbound outreach. But it's to me, it's just setting the table, and then the continuity is important. Where we fall off, and again, not sure we have enough time to go through all this today, but where we fall off is one of the issues we talked about early on, is then the onus is on the salespeople to say, okay, can they provide the value that will enable the buyer to make that initial go, no-go decision, and having made that, then be able to get them across the finish line. Because the goal for sellers, I think if they think about this in the right fashion, if buyers are trying to quickly gather information, make good decisions, that first decision is, are we going to make a change or not? They're going to make that based on some information you provide that enables them to have enough insight to say, yeah, if we proceed, yeah, we'll be able to achieve our outcomes with this type of solution. They base that decision on somebody's product. And so for me, I always want that to be me. So I front loaded as much of the value, quote unquote, as I could into the selling process early on. So discovery became critical to be very precise and really understand what the one true thing is that was driving the decision, qualify them against my product and service I was offering, and be the one they were making that first decision about. That was their vision in mind, was my solution. And if you could do that, then you're pretty golden.
The last area to build on that, Andy, that we've seen that where things break down is the lack of consistency and focus in that handoff from marketing to sales. So sales playbooks have become more common these days.
Sure.
Unfortunately, they often mean it's the bin in which all the marketing material stuff, to use the technical term, is dumped, to use another technical term. And if we really take seriously that sales is service and that we are bringing value right from the beginning to our prospects who want to solve a problem, then the sales playbook ought to be the place where the best of buyer practices, of seller practices, is combined with insights from the buying process. So when we put together a sales playbook, it is not simply the repository of all the marketing stuff that's available. It's actually the buying experience as though buyers had designed it themselves. And that comes from having spoken with a bunch of them and understanding what they want, and speaking with a bunch of sellers, the best sales performers, and understanding what works. So putting those together becomes an incredibly powerful tool that then allows what you were just talking about to happen more consistently, and for the best of the buying, of the selling practices, and the best of the buyer insights to come together into a consistent experience.
Yeah, and I think the challenge to that, and we'll wrap up with this just because we're running out of time here, but unfortunately is that, as Gartner pointed out in their research, is that for most of these purchases, again, if we're talking about a product or service that some company may buy once every 5 years or so on, they don't have a process. And whatever research you've done into creating your playbook about, this is what they always do, they don't always do it because it's unique every time they do it. And so increasingly, I think that the playbooks have to be much more flexible, because part of the job of the seller is going to have to be going in and really helping the buyer learn how to buy, learn how they buy, because they don't know. I mean, they haven't documented. If we buy a CRM system every 10 years, there's not a documented process for buying a CRM system. And this is sort of replicated. So I think, Gartner really hit on it. And I think it's a key thing for sellers they need to really think about, is instead of doubling down on fixed playbooks, it's like understanding that the situations are unique, and you're going to have to be very flexible in terms of how you adopt them, use them, update them, and so on, based on the situation. So, well, Wayne, it's been fantastic. We're unfortunately running out of time. We'll have to do this again.
Amen.
Yeah, this is fun.
And you know what? Probably the issues that we're talking about aren't going to go away. So I think we can update this at some point in the future.
No, that's a whole separate conversation. But why can't we make some of these fundamental sales problems just disappear? Given we've been doing this now for 130 years, you'd think we should be able to. So, but whole separate conversation.
One podcast at a time, Andy.
Yeah, one podcast, one email, so on. All right. Well, Wayne, tell folks how they can get in touch with you.
Sure. So the information that I've referenced can be found at our website at B2P Partners.com. And B2P is not B2B, but it's better than B2B. It's business to prospect. B2PPartners.com.
Excellent. All right. Well, Wayne, thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy.
Okay, friends, that was Accelerate for the week. First of all, as always, I want to thank you for joining me. And I want to thank my guest, Wayne Cerullo. Join me again next week as my guest will be Chris Mullins. Chris is the phone sales doctor and CEO of law firm Conversions, and author of a book titled Monkey Business for Today's Phone-Weary Office. Hear, speak, see no evil, and take Friday off. We're going to talk about how to improve your conversion of your inbound calls into qualified sales leads. You'll enjoy this conversation, so be sure to join us then. Before you go, don't forget to check out The Sales House. That is the sales performance accelerator for B2B sellers just like you. Visit thesaleshouse.com. So thanks again for joining me. Until next week, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.
RingDNA is the leading sales enablement platform that uses AI to help scale business growth. Trusted by the top companies across the globe, RingDNA offers a suite of powerful tools for every sales role. The RingDNA Dialer radically improves sales productivity and call connection rates, while guided selling helps reps know exactly what to do and when to do it. Conversation AI uses artificial intelligence to surface the most impactful coaching opportunities in real time. So, no matter where your team is working from, the RingDNA platform can help them exponentially increase call connections, opportunities, and revenue. Learn more at ringdna.com/platform. That's ringdna.com/platform.